Hola, yo soy Maria. My name's Maria, and the story I'm about to read to you is not only one of Big Bird's favorites, but it's my favorite too. The story's called The Shoemaker and the Elves. Once upon a time, in a small country village, there lived a poor shoemaker and his wife. One afternoon, the shoemaker discovered that he had only enough leather left to make one more pair of shoes. With a heavy heart, he cut them out, and leaving the pieces on his workbench, went slowly up the stairs to the small room over the shop where he and his wife lived. As they sat down to their meager supper, she said, "Well, my husband, did we sell any shoes today?" "No," he replied. "There was only enough leather for one more pair. I have just finished cutting them out, and tomorrow morning I must stitch them and hope that we will have a customer." Early the next morning, the shoemaker hurried down the stairs, and there on the workbench was the most beautiful pair of shoes he had ever seen. He was very surprised and did not know what to think. He picked up the shoes and examined them carefully. They were very sturdy, with tiny, neat stitches that had obviously been made by a fine craftsman. Soon, a customer came into the shop. The shoes fit him exactly, and since they were so well made, he bought them and paid more than the shoemaker had asked. The poor shoemaker was overjoyed, for now he had money to buy leather for 2 more pairs of shoes with enough left over for a fine dinner. He quickly set off to make his purchase, and by supper time he had cut out the shoes and left them on the workbench, ready to be stitched the next day. He hummed softly as he climbed the stairs, for that night he smelled good things in the soup kettle that hadn't been there for a long time. The next morning, the shoemaker could hardly believe his eyes, for there on his workbench were 2 new pairs of fine shoes. Within the hour, a customer arrived who was so pleased with the shoes that he gave the shoemaker enough money to make 4 new pairs. And so day after day, the shoemaker purchased more leather and worked happily at his bench, cutting out twice as many shoes as the day before. And night after night, when the rich fragrance from the soup kettle lured him from his task, he whistled as he climbed the stairs. Try as they might, the fortunate couple could find no explanation for the mysterious events that had brought such a change to their lives. One evening, the shoemaker's wife said, "Why don't we go down to the shop tonight and see for ourselves who is doing all of this work?" Her husband agreed, and late that night they crept down the stairs and peeked through the door that led to the shoemaker's shop. There on the workbench were 2 little elves, stitching and tapping away with such skill and speed that the shoemaker could hardly follow their movements. The husband and wife looked on silently, and then went back up the stairs. Back in their cozy room, the wife said, "We should be very grateful to those little elves. They have made us rich. But did you notice their clothes? Why, they're threadbare, and with winter coming, the elves will freeze. I would like to make them some new pants and shirts and coats, and I can knit them some new stockings, and you can make each of them a pair of shoes." The shoemaker readily agreed, and they set right to work on the gifts. Since the elves were very tiny, the clothes were quickly finished and set out on the workbench. The next night, the couple again crept down the stairs and peered into the workshop. There were the elves, beautifully dressed in their new shirts of green, shining silk and soft velvet suits of the richest chocolate brown. As they pulled on the tiny silk stockings and shiny black boots, they danced and laughed and jumped for joy, so that the shoemaker and his wife could hardly keep from dancing themselves as they watched. Then suddenly the elves stopped, looked around, and ran quickly out the door into the night. They never came back, but the shoemaker and his wife still smile at each other over the soup kettle, remembering their wonderful secret helpers.